Welcome back, focused learners. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating explainer that unpacks the internal world of a highly intelligent mind. We're going to look at the actual psychology behind what it feels like to be highly intelligent. Because, as we're about to see, having a fast-moving brain, it isn't just about acing tests or always having the right answers. It's actually a deeply complex and honestly, sometimes a very heavy psychological experience.
Okay, let's dive into this. Society generally operates on this massive assumption. If you're highly intelligent, your life is just inherently easier, right? People assume you solve problems faster, you succeed without really trying, and everything just kind of clicks into place. But the reality, and this is backed by psychology, is completely different. Intelligence actually comes with its own set of silent, emotional, social, and existential struggles that people on the outside just rarely understand.
To understand these hidden challenges, we first have to look at how things work under the hood. Section 1, the restless, overactive mind, exploring the internal engine of intelligence. If you identify as highly intelligent, this is probably going to resonate deeply with you. Your mind is just restless. It's literally like having 50 browser tabs open at once. Music is playing from one of them, and you have absolutely no idea which one it is. Your brain constantly questions everything. And I don't just mean authority or traditions, but even your own thoughts. You just don't accept things at face value. Plus, because your brain naturally craves complexity and challenge, routine tasks or repetitive conversations feel, well, painfully dull. So if you ever find yourself zoning out, procrastinating, or just losing motivation, it's usually not because you're lazy. It's simply because your brain is practically begging for more complexity to stay engaged. And that intense craving for complexity means your mind is always on. You're constantly replaying every single possibility in your head. You deeply analyze words, situations, even your own emotions. You probably know the exact feeling I'm talking about. Someone says something just slightly off, and while everyone else moves on like it's nothing, your brain is working overtime, dissecting every possible meaning and outcome. It is a completely exhausting loop. And this brilliantly illustrates a clinical concept you might be all too familiar with: analysis paralysis. Psychologists use this term to describe what happens when too much thinking actually makes decision-making harder instead of easier. Your massive processing power, which, don't get me wrong, is usually a huge asset, essentially creates a giant traffic jam in your head. You see so many angles, so many potential outcomes, that picking just one single path feels absolutely impossible. But that internal overactivity doesn't just stay locked in your head. It deeply impacts how you interact with everyone else. Section 2, the social and emotional toll. Navigating a world of small talk and hidden motives. Have you ever sat at a crowded lunch table and felt completely alone? You struggle to connect because you're craving deep, meaningful conversations. You want to talk about philosophy, psychology, or abstract, complex ideas. But, most people are perfectly content just making small talk. And when your profound desire for depth is met with superficial chatter about the weather, it naturally leaves you feeling incredibly isolated and completely misunderstood. This feeling of isolation is only compounded by your intense awareness. As the explainer puts it, your brain sees every hidden motive. Highly intelligent people routinely pick up on patterns, behaviors, and subtle emotional shifts that others completely breeze right past. Now, while this heightened awareness can be an amazing tool, it also makes you highly sensitive to negativity, dishonesty, and manipulation. Seeing the hidden motives behind people's actions all the time is, quite frankly, incredibly draining. And it's not just about noticing those hidden motives. It's about actively absorbing the emotional state of the entire room. Highly intelligent individuals are very often highly empathetic. You don't just recognize someone else's pain, you absorb it like a sponge. You understand their struggles so deeply that you essentially take them on as your very own. There's actually a specific psychological term for this phenomenon: emotional contagion. This is when you take on the emotions of others without even realizing you're doing it. Because your brain processes information so deeply, you mirror the sadness, the stress, or the anxiety of the people around you. This is exactly why social interactions can leave you feeling completely and utterly depleted, even if the hangout seemed totally fine on the surface. I really want this next thought to sink in for a second. You carry emotional weight that isn't even yours. If you constantly feel emotionally heavy, it can be deeply validating to realize that a huge portion of that weight doesn't even belong to you. It's just a side effect of your mind's intense empathetic processing. As if that social and emotional weight wasn't enough, we really need to address the intense pressure. Section 3,
the crushing weight of expectations, the unforgiving standard of perfection.
Because you're smart, you know exactly what greatness looks like, and naturally, you expect it from yourself. You probably struggle with setting impossibly high standards, operating under this brutal rule that anything less than absolutely perfect is a total failure. But this relentless drive for perfection, it doesn't lead to satisfaction. It inevitably leads straight to intense frustration, endless burnout, and that nagging, constant feeling that you were just never quite good enough.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the formal clinical term for this, maladaptive perfectionism. Listen, this isn't just about wanting to do a good job. In psychology, maladaptive perfectionism is a specific, harmful belief system where any flaw, no matter how tiny, completely negates the entire effort. It's a toxic loop. Your high intelligence actually traps you into feeling like a constant failure simply because perfection is, well, an impossible metric. And the wild part is, this pressure isn't just internal, it is heavily reinforced by the outside world. People have just come to expect you to perform perfectly every single time. There is this constant, heavy pressure to succeed. You live with the terrifying fear that if you make just one mistake, people will suddenly say, "Wait a minute, I thought you were smart." It transforms every single task into a high-stakes test of your core identity.
All of this external pressure, combined with that internal perfectionism, creates the absolute perfect storm for imposter syndrome, which is the intense anxiety and fear of failure driven by the pressure to succeed. Despite a literal mountain of evidence proving your capability and your intelligence, imposter syndrome makes you feel like a fraud who is just one tiny mistake away from being exposed. It's a remarkably heavy burden to carry around.
Let's move on and see how this builds into something positive, setting up our final resolution. Section 4, embracing your rare gift, setting boundaries for your mind.
The fundamental truth of this entire explainer is this: intelligence is not just about having all the answers. It's about seeing the world in layers that others simply cannot see. And yes, that multi-layered awareness can be incredibly lonely, confusing, and even painful sometimes. But it is also the exact thing that drives deep innovation, profound empathy, and incredible problem solving. It's a highly unique perspective that only you possess. So how do we make this sustainable? Well, we have to protect the gift. Managing a highly intelligent mind really requires three distinct things. First, it requires balance to ensure you aren't constantly burning yourself out. Second, it requires firm boundaries to stop that emotional contagion and protect your own energy. And finally, and this is crucial, it requires surrounding yourself with the right people. You need people who genuinely engage your mind rather than drain it. So, the crucial point is this. If you ever find yourself feeling overwhelmed by your own brain, I want you to remember this quote: "You're not too much. You just think deeper than most." Your mind is not a curse. It is a brilliant, totally rare gift. It just simply requires a customized operating manual to keep it running smoothly without overheating. Which leaves us with this final, essential question to reflect on. How will you protect the rare gift of your mind? Now that you have the actual psychological vocabulary for what you've been experiencing, the analysis paralysis, the emotional contagion, the maladaptive perfectionism, what specific boundaries will you put in place today to protect your peace and really nurture your incredible intellect?